Okay, good morning, everyone. How are you? How is everything? Right now, we're admitting everyone in. Today, we're going to review on foreign policy, and we're going to review the main points of foreign policy. Okay, so while everyone is coming in, I want you to remember what we talked about last session on the definition of foreign policy. Okay, and also the different characteristics and how is foreign policy used in the world in every country? Why is it important and why is it used? These main points I want you to think about very well. Okay, hopefully everyone will come in soon. Okay, and I wanted to open up the camera today so that I can see you and we can discuss and talk. Okay, I'm going to share a really nice video I found on YouTube. It talks about the different characteristics of foreign policy. So it's really nice. It's a kind of refresh for the main ideas we talked about, and as well as it's new kind of examples, new kind of characteristics of foreign policy that's important. Okay? Okay. So, okay, great. Yes, Yusuf Shaheen, open up your camera. Nozad Ahmad. Okay, I'm getting in everyone right now. Let me load up the video and the PowerPoint presentation. Okay? Now, while I do and everyone is coming in, I want you to think about what is the definition of foreign policy? Okay, we talked a lot about foreign policy. What's the main definition and characteristics? Okay, so let's try to remember here. What is the main definition and the main characteristics? Okay, anyone remembers? Okay, okay, let's get in the new people. Yes, okay. Yes, good morning, Azadeen, and everyone else. Okay, I want you to open up the camera if you can. Yes, today we want to talk, and I'm gonna right now load up the video. Now, let me just share with you on the whiteboard, okay? Just the main characters before we go into the PowerPoint, okay? And let me just review with you what is the main definition of foreign policy? What is it? So let's put foreign policy, okay? Foreign policy. Yes. So someone did on the chat. That's great. Hi, how are you, Yusuf? How is everything going? I hope everything goes fine with you. Okay? If you can't open the audio, you can chat, but I want you to open up the audio, okay? Including Yusuf, yes? So please open up your audio and chat and camera. This is really important part of your participation and behavior. And also it's part of, being interactive in it's fine. Okay? For today it's great. Make sure you make sure the microphone is working well, okay? So, I want everyone to think about the definition of foreign policy.
Anyways,
Yes, okay. Make sure that your audio is open when you talk. Okay, good. So let's start with foreign policy. We said that it's a relationship between the government, right, and other governments, other international organizations, and the world around the government, right? If it's organizations outside the government, in the sense of all around the world, including its country, anything really that's outside of the government, relationship with it is foreign policy. Okay, now this office differs from the local issues in the country. Local issues in the country, the government has other sectors, okay, or other kind of branches, right? Foreign policy is the main branch in the world in the governments for dealing with external issues outside of the government. If it's war, if it's peace, if it's security issues, environment, women's issues, all kinds of topics, human rights, development of the world in different ways, it's foreign policy. Okay? So, any questions on that point? Yeah, is that clear for you? Do you have any questions? Okay? I thought I would review with you the main concepts and definitions before we would go into the video. Okay? So, give me an example of a foreign policy. Let's give me an example of one. So let's write an example. Let's give an example. Okay, so let's write down example. Let's give an example of a kind of foreign policy. We talked last time about a 5-year plan for China. Okay, industrialization of China and other countries. They want to improve their industries, they want to improve their economy, and so they have a 5-year plan. And so in that example, the foreign policy of China, it makes sure that all the world and the governments and organizations in every single sector and economy and others that have the you know that are affected or have the interest to know knows, right? Maybe they put in the media. Okay, so who deals with all of this? The foreign policy part of China in the government. Okay, it's called foreign affairs or foreign policy or the office for foreign affairs, whatever it's called. Okay, we said that each country has a different name for it. Yes, so usually in Arabic it's called وزارة الخارجية, right? Yes. In English, foreign policy, foreign affairs. Okay, Ministry of Foreign Affairs usually. Okay, so if someone can give me an example, that would be extra credit for today.
What's the example, Tani? What
An
do you want
example of
example
foreign
of?
policy. Yes, example from the real world of foreign policy. Just any example. Okay?
You want me to tell you an example
Yes.
of foreign
Yes.
policy?
Yes, if you can, yes, please.
How Egypt deals with Israel.
Excellent job. How is that foreign policy?
أو يعني how Egypt deal أو Arabs بصفة عامة how Arabs deal with anyone who deals with Israel.
Excellent job.
Like the Muhammad Ramadan
Okay.
situation, like how they were upset with Emirates because they're like حاجة اسمها التطبيع.
Okay.
Did I get the grade?
Okay. So the relationship between Arabs and Israel, and the relationship between the Egypt and Israel. But here when we say the Arab world, is the Arab world a country? Each one is a different country, right? This is important. So Egypt is a country. So foreign policy in the sense of this is with the government. That's a good point, Azzuddin. Okay, excellent job. Okay, so the government is a foreign policy, right? As for usually if it's like an organization where the Arab world all together, okay, in the sense of, or Asia or any kind of regional organization like the Arab League, right? That would be more foreign policy of the Arab League, okay? Or that would be the foreign policy of an organization. Or it's more of international relations, yes? Because that is dealing more of international level, regional, international, okay? Now for Egypt, for example, that would be foreign policy, okay? Now, give me an example, like how would the foreign policy deal with the issue of Muhammad Ramadan told me about? How would it deal with it for Egypt or the Arab world in the sense of the Arab League? How do you think?
Well, the government, there's no rule, like there's no specific rule that says that Egyptians can deal with
Excellent.
Israelis or Jews, but it's like that hateful between people that we can't deal with them.
Excellent. Okay.
And like I think there's a huge difference between Mace and Jews and Israelis.
Excellent job. That's a really good point. Okay. So number one, let's
The
talk about.
Egyptian people, they don't get this point.
Okay. So that's a really good point that I talked about Azadeen. You for sure get the extra credit for it. And everyone else, please give me examples, one different examples. In this example, number one, you talked about an important point. In the foreign policy, it's obviously the government needs to kind of give definitions or a kind of direction, right? If there are any countries that in the past there was war or conflict, or opposite, there were any kind of peace and then it changed right now, right? The foreign policy needs to show needs to show its citizens, right? The country of, can we deal, can we not deal, what is the criteria, right? Okay, because this is even 10 years, if it passes 20, 50 years, sometimes it takes a long time. Okay, so if there is war and now peace, or peace and then war, this change really affects the country. Who deals with this? The foreign policy. Good job. So the foreign policy should be clear about it, right? If the citizens are confused, if there is a confusion in the country, then it means the foreign policy needs to do its work in the government in the sense of clearing things out so that people can be clear about these issues. Okay, good job. Okay, that's excellent example, as a dean from this region and from our culture. It's an excellent example. Okay. Another example. Let's think about maybe environment or topics today that, like for example, in the Corona situation today. How do you think foreign policy would work? What's the role of foreign policy with the Corona situation? Let's write it down. So Izzuddin talked about Egypt, right? With Israel as a kind of foreign policy that, there's always change of how the relationship is, because there was war and then there is peace, and then it needs to have a kind of clear situation. Right now there are issues with that, and also the Arab world. Okay, so that's obviously foreign policy in the sense of war, peace, and other relationships between countries, okay, in the region. What about another one? Here I'm asking about the corona situation. Now, this is more health, right? You have the World Health Organization from the United Nations always doing lectures or always putting online webinars. Did anyone see one of the webinars on the news for WHO, World Health Organizations? Okay, so corona situation right now.
So I've seen.
Yes, excellent job, Azzuddin.
Corona situation has something. It created some tension between China and America.
Excellent. It created tension.
I think that America sent the virus.
Excellent.
And the American people think that created the virus and spread it between itself, and then created a vaccine and didn't tell anyone about it. And now China is the only country, China and I guess Finland.
Yes.
They're the only. They're living like at all.
Okay, excellent job. So you have the corona.
As if corona was nothing. No, I can.
Good job. Okay, that's a really good point. So you have the U.S. and China. It affected their relationship greatly, right? This is foreign policy, different than the international situation or international relations, right? So you have here two countries, U.S. and China. It was affected negatively, the corona situation. Okay, good point, Azzuddin. Excellent job for today. Okay, so for sure you're gonna get extra credit. The corona situation, obviously in world terms, is different in the sense of health. Like I said, World Health Organization, that's more of international relations. Countries, the foreign policy of different countries, of how they dealt with the situation and how they deal with other countries in the region and the UN and everyone else. Now, between the US and China, obviously it's a different world, right? They have issues of how did it happen and everything else, and there are obviously rules in the world, right? Every government has its own kind of rule, especially if it's a big country like the US or China. they have, or Russia, or for example, Europe, European Union, right? Or for example, the Arab League. Here we talked about before the Arab League different than Egypt, the European Union different, like for example, than United Kingdom or Italy or Greece or Belgium. Okay, each country is different, right? Some countries are bigger than others, some countries are more powerful. You have Canada, for example, you have different countries in the world. Okay, so this is put in mind of how it affects the foreign policy. Obviously, the United Nations is the biggest organization, and usually it is the final say of the world in international relations because all the countries come together. But also you have the big governments, right? So you have their foreign policy, and obviously big governments and strong governments are different than middle or weaker or small ones, or in war or in peace. So it depends. Okay, this is really important. Yes. Okay. For the corona situation, obviously there are a lot of problems right now between the U.S. and China. And so this maybe we can take next week about it, and when we talk about international relations also. Okay. If you want, you can go into the news and present to class. This is also extra credit for you. Okay, and it will improve your grade greatly, and also it's nice for you. You'll have fun with it, and we can. It'll be nice for us to get to know more, right, about the corona and how with foreign policy. Okay, maybe you can talk about U.S. and China. Maybe we can talk about how the governments abided by rules for the corona. This is also part of foreign policy because it's an external out of the country's situation. Okay, great. Okay, so any questions on that? Can anyone give me another example before we start the video? Okay, let me share the video right now with you. Okay, I want you to concentrate, number one, on the definition, number two, the characteristics of foreign policy, number three, the examples given. Okay, I want you in the end, when we finish up the video, for you to give me your own example of a kind of foreign policy in the world and how, like Azadin did, how it affected the world and from which situation. Okay, so let's start. Okay, let's start it from here. Okay, and make it big. Yes. So if you can see that's good, just tell me you can. So okay, okay, great.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hello everyone. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Let's start our today's discussion. Today we are going to discuss what is foreign policy, and we will be discussing its definition, factors affecting the foreign policy of any nation, what is the importance of foreign policy, what are the tools used for the implementation of foreign policy,
Okay, everyone, here we have something really important. Number one, this video is very nice. It gives you a kind of definition of foreign policy from a different international perspective. Obviously, this video is from perspective of the region of Pakistan and India. Okay, um, and it's very important because you'll find that different regions they see foreign policy differently. Okay, so there's also a cultural factor here with foreign policy. So, for example, obviously, if you're part of the foreign policy in Egypt, it's different than if you're part of the foreign policy in different, in the US or in Europe or in Asia. Okay, so I want to concentrate on this definition, which is close to the other one we took. Okay, here he's talking. What's important, as you can see, is the geography. Yeah, we didn't talk about geography yet. So that's an addition. Geography. We talked about economic power in the sense of economic development. Right here, economic power, obviously, the interest of having a powerful economy in the country or in the region. Okay, and then you have power structure. Okay, the power structure, which means that they want to develop the country to be powerful. Okay, and ethnic cultural ties. So this is also a really nice addition. So as you can see, these are all important for foreign policy. Now, these factors, okay, are what what affects foreign policy in the sense of economy, right? Economic power, geographic power structure, ethnic cultural ties. Did you notice that in from the last video that we talked about from Crash Course, the US foreign policy is different. Okay? It's more because it's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, foreign policy in the world and the strongest, and also is strong as a country. So that means that um, its advocacy, foreign policy is very different than other countries. It's from a different region than this one, and also it has a different kind of position in the world. Okay, so this is really important. The United Nations is in the U.S., so this also affects. It's in New York. Okay, so obviously the US is different than other countries. And last time we talked about more of development, of developing the country, of developing the world, really, of the UN, environment, different topics, war, security issues, and peace. Okay. Today it's more, if you can see, about from perspective from a different culture. Um, Economic power, right? Ethnic cultural ties, power structure, and geography. Okay. Okay. So I want to keep in mind here the difference and to add on the different characteristics from this culture. Okay. So obviously, if we talk about from the Arab world, foreign policy will be different. Yes. So let's complete. Put this in mind. Okay, great.
It's a geography where the country is located.
Okay, so here this is a really important part of foreign policy in many countries of the world. Okay, you have number one, they should protect the territorial integrity of the country. So every country has its own territorial integrity. Do you see on the map, for example, of the world, right? Every country has boundaries. Okay, so you have a kind of line. So, for example, Egypt has its own boundary between Libya and between Sudan and between Israel. So it has these three bordering countries, right? These three bordering countries needs to respect Egypt's territory, and Egypt needs to respect their territories. This is part of foreign policy. Another one is national interests. Okay, national interest of the country. Okay, so it should promote and seek its national interest. Can someone give me an example for Egypt, for example? What would be a national interest for Egypt that the Egypt would like to promote? Think about it. Okay, L- Lace Natavji, can you give us an example? Yes. What do you think? Like, for example, Egypt maybe has an interest to secure itself right now from the corona situation. Okay, maybe there's a country that Egypt believes has high rates of corona, and it's near it. Okay, as a national interest, Egypt would then, as a foreign policy, what would you do? Would it secure its high rates of that? Okay, this is important. For example, at the beginning of the current situation, there was Saudi Arabia because it has international air big, and Saudi Arabia to secure Saudi Arabia from that. It was a kind of foreign policy. Another example can be, for example, if Egypt has an interest to develop maybe its sector um, on the army, maybe. Okay, so it wants to improve its army. It may have, for national interest, alliances with other countries that have strong armies so that can improve the army and vice versa. Okay, so training. Another one also is in, for example, economy. Yeah, it wants to develop its economy. So maybe with big countries in the world that have high developed economies, it would do mutual programs. Okay, okay. So this is important here. Okay, so any questions so far? Okay, so let's right now go into the promotion of economic interest.
Economic power, all the other interests are attached with each other.
Okay, so here we have the um, the different kinds of foreign policies, tools and stages. Okay, let's go back to the tools. Let's put it on the whiteboard together. Okay, I want everyone to name me one tool that we talked about before for foreign policy. Okay, so one tool. One tool of foreign policy. Let's think about it. One tool of foreign policy. He talks about foreign aid, right? So you have aid between countries, okay, from either organizations, programs in the country or outside, or in different countries. What else? You have foreign aid, and what else? What besides foreign aid? You have foreign aid, and you also have security, right? So you need the security. Okay, so foreign aid, security, diplomacy. What is diplomacy? Can someone help me out here? Diplomacy. So let me write down the definition of diplomacy. This is a really important aid in foreign policy, diplomacy. It's really how the behavior of the foreign policy itself with other governments, right? The etiquette, the formality, how it goes by. Okay? So the etiquette or formality with other countries. Okay? With other countries. Okay. Any questions on that? Is anyone confused, not clear about this part? Okay, so the different tools and the different branches and different sections of foreign policy. Okay, so these are the main ones here. Okay, the definition of foreign policy, giving examples, diplomacy, right, and different tools. Let's go back to the video. One second, yes. Okay. Okay, so here it talks about the different stages of foreign policy. Okay, so the first one is agenda setting. So, for example, today as a country, like he's saying, any country in the world. Let's take, for example, um, Pakistan, for example. There's an issue or problem that arises and needs to be addressed. They have maybe the issue right now with the corona, okay, and they're having a big issue, let's say. So, obviously, they need to address the issue, number one, and issue the problem. Okay, state the problem. So the problem is that the corona is increasing in Pakistan, let's say. Then the next step would be the formulation. Possible policies are created and debated. Okay, so for example, let's say that there are policies that, for example, would solve the problem. Let's say they need to increase a good relationship with another country that has effective solution for the problem, and it's near them. So they believe that it will be a good idea. Or an organization, or for example the UN has a certain kind of policy they want to go by. Okay, so this in the formulation they talk about, and they debate and they discuss which one is better, which one is worse, or which one is more effective, which one is more practical, which one, no, it's not that great, let's move on to another one. Okay, then the adoption is the government adopts one policy. So in that stage the government chooses one of them, one of the different ideas that they debated on, discussed, and they adopt it. The next step is implementation. They implement this policy. Okay, so that one they did chose after a long debate and discussion, they implemented, and it is a appropriate way to appropriate way to implement the policy. So, for example, they look at how they will implement it in Pakistan. Okay, this is the implementation stage. Then they evaluate. That's the last stage. So the official agencies, they judge the performance of the